Picture this, right? You create a billion-dollar franchise. I mean, you are universally recognized as the absolute master of your medium.
The best in the world.
Exactly. Decades of your work have they've completely redefined what people think is even possible in your field.
Right.
And then right at the height of your influence, you demand your name be scrubbed from the blockbuster movie posters. You turn down millions of dollars in guaranteed royalties.
Yeah, just walking away from all of it.
Literally all of it. You publicly declare the industry. You help build an unbearable blight, and you just leave. Why would anyone do that?
It defies almost every modern metric of success.
Yeah.
We're so conditioned to believe the ultimate goal of creative work is, well, financial security.
Yeah.
And leaving a massive mainstream legacy.
Right, the dream.
Yeah, the dream. So to achieve the absolute pinnacle of both and then actively reject them, that requires a set of personal principles that most people would find completely incomprehensible.
Well, welcome to today's deep dive. Today we are exploring the brilliant, eccentric, and fiercely independent mind of writer Alan Moore.
Such a fascinating guy.
Oh, absolutely. So using a comprehensive stack of biographical sources, interviews, and literary analysis, we are going to unpack how this self-taught writer elevated the comic book medium to high literature.
And we'll get into his legendary battles over creator rights, too.
Yes, the creator rights, his total rejection of Hollywood, and his ultimate conclusion that the stories we tell don't just, pass the time. They literally alter human consciousness.
Which is a huge concept.
Yeah.
But to understand how he eventually dismantled the corporate comic book machine, we really first need to look at how he learned to dismantle the constraints of his own upbringing.
Right, because he didn't start out with any sort of advantage.
Not at all. His relationship with authority and institutional structures was forged very early. Born in 1953, he grew up in this area called the Boroughs. It was a really poverty-stricken working-class area of Northampton, England.
And it lacked basic facilities, right? High illiteracy rates.
Yeah, but Moore found a really profound sense of community there. And crucially, he was a voracious reader from, the age of 5. He basically used the local library to explore worlds way beyond his immediate geography.
But then that early intellectual freedom just violently clashed with his formal education, didn't it?
Oh, massively. He passed his exams and entered a grammar school, which completely shifted his environment.
Total culture shock.
Yeah. Suddenly, he's surrounded by middle-class students with vastly different cultural baselines. He went from being this top pupil in his primary school to struggling at the absolute bottom of the class.
Wow.
The academic environment didn't just frustrate him, it completely alienated him.
But he didn't just accept that, I guess I'm not smart enough.
No, not at all. He developed this highly analytical view of the alienation. He looked at the institution itself and concluded the school was running what he called a covert curriculum.
A covert curriculum. I love that phrasing.
Right. In his view, the overt curriculum was, math and literature, but the covert curriculum, the actual purpose of the place, was indoctrination.
Teaching them punctuality, obedience.
Exactly. Punctuality, obedience to arbitrary authority, and basically the acceptance of monotony, preparing them to be compliant workers in an industrial society.
It's like he viewed the school system as this assembly line factory, just stamping out identical parts.
That's a perfect way to put it.
And forcing his hyper-imaginative brain into that system is like trying to run complex modern software on, an ancient calculator.
It just crashes.
Right. It crashes the system. He needed an environment where the output wasn't compliance, but actual creation, which he eventually found writing for British sci-fi magazines in the late 70s and early 80s.
Titles like 2000 AD and Doctor Who Weekly. But the irony here is that while he escaped the school factory, he entered a totally different kind of rigid structure.
Oh, the page limits.
Yes. This was his masterclass. He wanted to write long, ongoing comic strips, but the publishers only offered him these short, standalone 4 to 5 page stories.
Which sounds easy, but that's incredibly daunting.
Oh, it's brutal. The mechanics of telling a complete story in 5 pages?
You have, 1 page to hook the reader and establish the world, maybe 3 pages to build the conflict, and then a final page for the twist or resolution?
Exactly. It forces an extreme economy of language and imagery. Every single panel has to do triple duty.
Right, like a single drawing has to establish mood, advance the plot, and reveal character all at the exact same time.
And Moore later credited these grueling, restrictive assignments as the best possible education and story construction he could have ever received. He learned the absolute limits of the medium.
He reminds me of a poet mastering the strict rules of a sonnet.
Oh, that's a great
Because
comparison.
you're confined to exactly 14 lines, this rigid rhyme scheme, it feels like a cage. But by mapping every inch of that tiny box, you figure out exactly where the structural weaknesses are, and you learn how to break out of it.
And mastering those constraints is exactly what paved the way for his American debut.
Mm.
That's where he took that structural knowledge and just blew the doors off mainstream comics.
So, enter Swamp Thing.
Right. DC Comics recruits him, and they give him Swamp Thing. Now, at the time, this was a formulaic, poorly selling monster comic.
Just a scientist who turned into a swamp creature, right?
Yeah, pretty standard stuff. And usually, to fix a failing title, the industry would just introduce a new villain or change the costume or do a crossover. But Moore took a radically different approach.
He dismantled the entire core identity.
Completely. Instead of just doing a scarier monster of the week, he wiped out the previous continuity with this brilliant narrative mechanism. He revealed that Swamp Thing wasn't a man who had turned into a plant.
This blew my mind when I first read it.
It's so good. He revealed it was a plant that had absorbed the dying man's memories. It merely thought it was human.
Which is monumental. I mean, by changing the ontology of the character, like what the character actually is, he just erased decades of convoluted narrative baggage.
He totally freed himself.
And he injected this profound sense of existential psychological horror into what was basically a campy monster concept.
Yeah, the character isn't just fighting external threats anymore. It's grappling with the terrifying realization that its entire humanity is just a biological illusion.
And the critical acclaim from that run gave him the leverage for 1986.
Watchmen.
Watchmen. Widely considered the greatest comic book ever written, first graphic novel to win a Hugo Award, putting it right up there with the heavyweights of science fiction prose.
And while the mature themes get a lot of attention, the real genius of Watchmen is his formal experimentation. He pushed the mechanics of the medium to do things that film or prose simply cannot do.
Give us the prime example of that, because it's fascinating.
Issue 5. It's titled Fearful Symmetry. Moore, along with the artist Dave Gibbons, engineered the entire comic as a structural palindrome.
A palindrome, like reading the same forwards and backwards.
Exactly. The layout of the final page is a near-perfect mirror image of the first page. The second-to-last page mirrors the second page, panel for panel.
Wow.
Yeah, this symmetrical design leads perfectly in the middle of the book.
And reading it is this deeply unsettling cognitive experience, because as you progress through the issue, your eye is subtly forced into these repetitive geometric patterns.
You feel trapped in a loop without even consciously realizing it.
Right. It physically mirrors the internal struggles of the characters, like Dr. Manhattan, who experiences all of time simultaneously and views free will as just an illusion.
The layout of the physical pages traps the reader in that exact same predetermined path. It's a masterful demonstration of how form can elevate function.
He proved comics weren't just stepping stones to movies. They were this complex spatial medium. But wait, I do struggle with this part of his legacy, though.
How so?
Well, he wanted to elevate comics to high literature, which he did. But if you look at the industry in the decades that followed, it kind of feels like all he actually did was give publishers an excuse to make superheroes relentlessly grim, violent, and depressing.
Right.
Like, everyone tried to copy the darkness of Watchmen without copying the structural genius. Did his attempt to mature the medium actually backfire?
That is a highly debated point. And honestly, Alan Moore actually agrees with your assessment.
Wait, really? He agrees.
He does. He takes a considerable share of the blame for that trend, though obviously he clarifies it was never his intention. His diagnosis of the fallout is so sharp, though.
What does he say?
He argues that comics in the 1980s didn't actually grow up. The industry didn't suddenly embrace complex adult themes across the board. Instead, he says, the comics merely met the emotional age of the adult audience coming the other way.
Meeting the emotional age of the audience coming the other way. Man, that is a searing indictment.
Isn't it?
He's basically saying adults weren't looking for challenging literature. They were just looking for their childhood nostalgia wrapped in enough cynical violence to make them feel like they were consuming something mature.
Exactly. And that realization highlighted this massive tension between his artistic ambitions and the reality of the corporate industry, which ultimately triggered the defining conflict of his career.
The creator rights battle.
Yeah. He realized elevating the artistic merit of comics was a completely hollow victory if the creators were still treated as disposable laborers by the corporations that own the IP.
So despite Watchmen's phenomenal success, his relationship with DC Comics just implodes over contract mechanics.
Right. Because at the time, work for hire was the standard. The publisher owned everything. But with Watchmen, Moore thought he had negotiated a breakthrough.
The reversion clause.
Yes, the contract stipulated that ownership of the characters would revert back to him and Dave Gibbons once the book went out of print.
Which, in the historical context of the 1980s, seemed like a guaranteed win.
Totally. Comics were ephemeral back then. They had a shelf life of a few months, maybe a year, and then they faded out of print.
But the publisher recognized Watchmen was a cultural phenomenon.
So they pioneered the concept of the continuously printed trade paperback, the graphic novel format.
Basically ensuring the book never, ever went out of print.
Exactly. They found a loophole. Because it was so critically acclaimed, they could keep it on bookstore shelves indefinitely, meaning the conditions for the rights to revert to Moore would literally never be met.
He realized the system was designed so the house always wins.
And he didn't pursue lengthy litigation or, beg for a larger share of the profits. His response was immediate and absolute.
What did he do?
He told the publisher that they had successfully swindled him, and as a result, he would never work for them again.
Wow.
He severed ties with the largest comic publisher in the world at the exact moment he was their most valuable asset.
But why completely walk away from a guaranteed fortune? I mean, he was the most famous writer in comics. He could have easily renegotiated for massive upfront payouts on future projects, right?
I didn't think so.
Could he have compromised just a little bit to secure his financial legacy? Is ideological purity really worth millions of dollars?
Well, to understand more, you have to understand how he views integrity. For him, a compromise isn't a strategic retreat. It's a surrender of the self.
A surrender.
Yeah. He believes if you compromise your core principles for financial security, you establish a precedent that you can be bought. He frequently says that if you don't walk away from compromised situations, you ultimately end up mastered by money.
Mastered by money.
By completely rejecting the financial incentive, he retained absolute ownership over his own creative conscience. For him, the empowerment comes specifically from knowing you do not have a price.
So he goes independent, creates his own imprint, America's Best Comics, launches massive hits like The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Right.
But his refusal to be mastered by money soon met an even bigger test, because the scale of the temptation scales way up. Hollywood comes calling.
Throughout the early 2000s, major film studios began adapting his seminal works into massive blockbusters. From Hell, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, V for Vendetta, Watchmen.
All high-budget cinematic treatments.
Yeah, but Moore had spent the 1980s intentionally engineering his comics to be unfilmable.
Right, because adapting a Moore comic into a film is like taking a complex, multi-layered oil painting and trying to turn it into a physical marble sculpture.
That's a really good way to look at it.
You can carve out the basic shapes, the literal information translates, you have the characters and the plot, but the fundamental magic of the original medium is just destroyed in the conversion.
And the primary mechanism lost in that translation is the reader's control over time and interpretation.
How so?
Well, his comics heavily utilize cognitive dissonance. You might read a caption box detailing a character's hopeful internal monologue, while the visual panel depicts an environment of impending doom.
I see.
In a comic, the reader's eye can linger on that contradiction. They experience the text and the image simultaneously, at their own pace. But a film dictates the pace. It forces a singular timeline onto the audience, which completely flattens the complex structural layers he painstakingly built.
So when Moore saw how the studios were streamlining his narratives, altering his endings to be more palatable, missing the core themes, he drew a hard
A
line.
very hard line. After dealing with the legal headaches and what he saw as creative disrespect, he demanded his name be entirely removed from any cinematic adaptation of work he didn't strictly own.
Invoking the spirit of the Alan Smithy pseudonym?
Exactly. The traditional fake name disgruntled film directors used when a studio butchered their vision. But Moore took it a step further than just protecting his reputation.
He refused the money.
He refused to accept a single cent of the royalty money generated by these global blockbusters.
He demanded his share of the cinematic profits be redistributed to the artists who drew the original comics, or just given away entirely. We're talking about walking away from an estimated several $1 million in easy, passive income.
It's the ultimate manifestation of his philosophy. You just cannot buy the kind of psychological empowerment that comes from looking at a mountain of Hollywood cash and saying, keep it. I'd rather have a clear conscience.
It's incredible. So, having comprehensively rejected both mainstream publishing and the Hollywood blockbuster machine, he turned his attention back to his roots.
Yeah, he focused on his hometown of Northampton. He transitioned into writing massive prose novels, and he began to publicly explore and articulate his highly unique definition of magic.
He effectively retired from the comic industry, calling the modern corporate landscape unbearable.
And he became highly critical of the cultural trajectory of the 21st century. He specifically pointed to the adult obsession with superhero movies as an infantilization of culture.
Infantilization. Because adults are obsessing over kids' characters.
Exactly. And his critique goes way beyond mere artistic preference. He views it as a societal retreat from complexity. He finds it deeply alarming that hundreds of thousands of adults line up to consume narratives centered around characters created 50 years ago, specifically designed to entertain 12-year-old boys.
So to Moore, when an adult population seeks comfort in the simplistic, binary morality of childhood nostalgia, it signals a culture that is terrified of grappling with the nuanced, difficult realities of the modern world.
That's precisely his argument.
So he steps away from that culture. He lives quietly in Northampton. He's often described as looking like this towering, Hagrid-like figure, massive beard, heavy rings.
Leaning fully into the persona of the local mystic, he openly declares himself a practicing magician.
But his concept of magic is profoundly literary, isn't it?
It is. He isn't talking about stage illusions or fantasy. He examines the etymological roots of the language itself. He points out that the phrase "to cast a spell" relies on the word spell.
Right, to spell.
To spell a word is to arrange specific symbols letters in a precise sequence to convey meaning.
The idea that art itself is a literal functional spell.
Yes.
The writer is the closest thing our contemporary world has to a functioning shaman. I mean, think about the mechanics of reading. A writer arranges black symbols on a white page. Years later, someone on the other side of the planet looks at those symbols and suddenly experiences profound terror or uncontrollable joy or a complete paradigm shift in how they view their reality.
The writer has successfully manipulated another human being's consciousness from afar. If that isn't magic, what is?
It completely reframes the concept of media consumption.
It does. Storytelling is not a passive activity. His life and philosophy demonstrate that the media we consume acts as a vital active tool that reshapes our perceptions, our beliefs, and ultimately the structure of our society.
When you engage with art, you are allowing another mind to cast a spell on you.
Exactly. It demands that we be incredibly vigilant and fiercely critical about the spells we allow others to cast upon us.
It's just such an incredibly empowering way to view the relationship between creator and audience. Alan Moore didn't just write iconic characters. He tested the extreme structural boundaries of a visual medium.
Proving it could hold the weight of complex philosophy.
And he fought relentlessly for creator ownership, establishing that artists shouldn't be treated as disposable gears in a corporate machine. And he proved that true artistic wealth is defined by an uncompromising integrity that literally cannot be bought.
In an era dominated by endless reboots, sprawling corporate-owned cinematic universes, and algorithm-driven content, Moore really stands as a monument to independent thought.
He refused to be a compliant worker on the assembly line.
And his journey challenges us to critically evaluate our own relationship with the media landscape.
Absolutely. So before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final expansive concept from Moore's philosophy. It's the spatial metaphor he calls the idea space.
Oh, I love this concept.
It's brilliant. Moore suggests that we should think of ideas, philosophies, and stories as actual physical geography within a universal space of human consciousness.
So in this framework, massive belief systems and mythologies act as the continents and oceans of the mind.
Right. When you learn a new concept or engage with a challenging piece of art, you are literally traveling to a new coordinate within this vast internal geography.
Think about the implications of that.
If ideas are actual places we visit, what kind of world are the movies, books, and deep dives you consume building in your own mind? Are you exploring vast, challenging, and untamed continents that push the boundaries of your understanding?
Or are you simply wandering around the same safe, corporate-owned amusement park every single day?
It's something to carefully consider the next time you encounter a story. Ensure the spells you let into your mind are actually worth the journey.
A vital perspective for anyone navigating modern media. Integrity and critical thought aren't just responsibilities for the creator, they're essential requirements for the audience.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the stories you're told, and we'll see you next time.